I was in the shapeshifter role. I was in the camouflage role. I was in the let me just try to see how I can fit kind of role. And like any great awakening in our lives, it takes something absolutely huge to stop the momentum of what we're currently on, right? That trajectory of life where we're learning to operate, where we're learning to try to be ourselves, where we're learning to show up. If you're not living true to yourself, and I wasn't at that time, I wasn't living as an expansive being, it's going to take something that rattles you to your core.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Tillamont and welcome to Her Ascension Story, the podcast that proves the world is transformed by every hero's personal adventure. Here we talk about the real and the raw things that make up life and what it really is. It's the authentic things that should be talked about more, and I'm talking people's stories from around the world that we can all see ourselves reflected in. Yoga, sex, consciousness, healing, the hard parts about life, and so much more. My hope is that you get inspired here to go deeper on your personal path. And if you like this stuff and you want to go deeper together, be sure to check me out on Instagram at Her Ascension Story, or head to my website, herascensionstory.com, to book a session. Thank you so much for being here. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everyone. Today with us is Bordner, a filmmaker by day and poet by night. She's a storyteller and truth seeker from Los Angeles, and she's formally trained in social and behavioral sciences, but left the public health world after a personal hardship in 2015, which thankfully inspired her to dive deeper into writing, because now she's the author of Story of Us and co-author of Natasha's Not My Name, both published in 2020. And if I can just brag a little bit about you, I actually have the Story of Us right next to me. It's one of my favorite books, and if you guys haven't checked it out yet, it's a collection of poetry and prose, beautiful illustrations by Lucienne Chen, and I just love it so much. So thank you so much for creating it.
Oh my gosh, that honestly just made me smile so big to hear that. I know that we had spoken a little bit about you receiving it, but the fact that you read it and the fact that you enjoyed it, it made all that blood, sweat, and tears worth it. So thank you so much for that praise. I really appreciate it very much.
Oh, of course, of course. And I love all the work you do, especially all the light that you share, through poetry and just stories and everything on Instagram on pretty much a daily basis. Were you always into writing? Or I would love for you to share a little bit about, if you were into writing as a kid, or if there was somebody that inspired you about it. Every writer has a different story.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think that the process of identifying as a writer has been a bit of a struggle for me. I actually think I forgot about it as my first love for probably a couple decades in the first part of my life. But when I think back to it, okay, so I guess let me start at the beginning, Sarah. Let me start at the beginning.
Yes.
So I feel, and I hear this from a lot of people that, as little kids, we have these big feelings, right? So I was this little kid in this little body with these really big feels, and I'm operating in this world and I don't know how to really do it. And I have parents that really don't know what to do with a spirited child. And I learned pretty quickly that there are certain ways that you engage in the world that either make you feel really great and expansive or make you feel like you really need to hide a part of who you are. Right? Certain things are more palatable socially, especially as a little kid who's a girl, right? Little girls have certain social expectations on them. And I felt those very, very young. And I didn't really know what to do operating in a world that wanted me to be in a box that I couldn't fit myself into, right? And of course, this is all through perspective that I've realized, like, oh man, I was just overflowing these spaces that I was in, and I was seeking and searching for an opportunity to expand beyond the environment that I was actually placed in. So I was thinking about this as a kid, just feeling overwhelmed, right? I just didn't know how to be myself. And I think about it now, and I have so much compassion for myself. In those big moments with those big feelings of overwhelm, the only thing that I felt that made me comfortable and made me feel calm was to write. So I actually was that kid that was in their room after having a big explosive fight with a family member, and I was like writing my feelings in the form of poetry. So it was actually the very first place that I found my home. And I didn't realize this for years and years and years. I had so many opportunities to think about what I wanted to do as I was moving through my life, but I just was still operating from this idea that I couldn't be exactly who I needed to be in the real world because the world couldn't hold that space. So writing was really just that private thing that I kind of kept hidden from almost myself, even that I actually needed it. Right. So it wasn't until I had a couple different catalyst moments in my life where I realized I didn't want to live as a fragmented self that I really realized, oh, wait, the very first time I felt at home was on the page. And that's the place I can never feel overwhelmed by myself. So it really has always been a part of me, but something that I needed to come back home to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how did you, I mean, you don't have to, you can, you're more than welcome to get into the personal hardship in 2015 that brought you back into writing, but really, how did you find your way back home onto the page, like you said?
I mean, I love that you give me the option to obviously dive in a vulnerable way. I think that the beautiful part about life is that we all have these stories that are within us, right? We all have
Hmm.
these I call them seeds of awakening. And like I said before, there was an opportunity that was placed in my life when I first picked up the pen, or I guess I was a kid, so I was like probably had a pencil or a crayon, who knows what it was. But I think the seed that was planted within me to have a freedom of self on a page was not fully recognized cognitively as a little kid, right? So I just planted it, though. It was still within my psyche. It was still a part of who I was, and I just kind of operated in the world. So I was still operating in this family that sometimes didn't know what to do with how big and expansive I was. I was still operating in the world that didn't know what to do with how big and expansive I was, but I started to play a role. I played a role really well. I played a role that let me choose to go to college for a degree that interested me but wasn't exactly right for me. Right? So I kind of just felt myself as I was growing and as I was changing that I was looking for something more. So I went to undergrad, I got a degree in psychology and urban studies, and that was part of my heart. I loved studying psychology because I love the intrapersonal. I love the aspect of the mind and how it influences behavior. And those were things that felt like it called me to attention, right? And then I kind of was, I'll be completely honest, I did not want to pay back student loans for undergrad. So I made an extremely irresponsible financial decision and decided to go to graduate school just because I would postpone my loans. And I ended up going for public health. And I love public health. Public health brings me from that intrapersonal to the interpersonal and externally motivated, like collective, which that to me, there's something really beautiful about realizing how the individual influences the collective and how the collective influences the individual. So I was engaging, long story still very long, I was engaging in academics that really were helping me feel like a part of my soul was being seen, right? That I wanted to understand how I influence the collective, how the collective influences me, and vice versa. Like through people in my life, I wanted to understand them better, and I wanted to understand how they interact in the world better, right? So I was doing it. I was in the shapeshifter role. I was in the camouflage role. I was in the let me just try to see how I can fit kind of role. And like any great awakening in our lives, it takes something absolutely huge to stop the momentum of what we're currently on, right? That trajectory of life where we're learning to operate, where we're learning to try to be ourselves, where we're learning to show up. If you're not living true to yourself, and I wasn't at that time, I wasn't living as an expansive being, it's going to take something that rattles you to your core. I got a phone call when I was 26 and found out that there was a very serious medical issue that I needed to tend to with my family. Ended up moving back to North Carolina pretty much on a whim. Booked a one way ticket. Ended up eventually moving all my stuff out to North Carolina and was tending to my mom who was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And it was soul shattering. It was the worst experience of my life. I have so much compassion for myself and for people who receive phone calls that change their life, because the momentum of playing a role and the momentum of showing up the best that you can in a life that doesn't accept you as you are, right, which is a pretty relatable thing. The momentum, when that shifts with a call that changes your life, it is extremely overwhelming. It is very unsettling. But the beautiful part in being extremely overwhelmed and unsettled is that my world turned upside down. And in that moment of turning my world upside down, my entire foundation cracked. I had nothing as a base anymore. And you know what happens when you have that base that's been covering your soul for so long? When that base cracks, the only thing left is your intuition. So I was pulled and pushed with one phone call into complete intuition mode. No longer was I thinking about what role I needed to play. No longer was I thinking about how I needed to stay small and not expand. I was thinking about caring for my mom. I was thinking about showing up for my family. And I was thinking about doing what I knew I needed to do. And for 9 months, that's the space that I lived in. And I will tell you, nothing brought me to greater presence. Nothing brought me to greater strength. Nothing brought me to greater awareness than that series of 9 months in caring for her. She ended up passing away in September of 2016. And I thought at that point that I had grieved what I needed to grieve, but that was absolutely just the beginning. I was kind of on a whirlwind of shock, and again, dealing with this feeling of grief and extreme loss in a world that wanted me to be who I was before this phone call happened. And I couldn't fit in that space anymore. You know, I just wasn't, I was not in, I didn't have the capacity to show up as a smaller version of myself. And I also didn't have the desire anymore. You know, the ultimate leveler in my life was that we get news that changes our lives and it completely redirects us to what really matters. And what really matters in life is not me showing up as less than who I am. So I think that in itself was this catalyst moment that said, you know, life will continue. It goes on. It just, you know, anyone that experiences major grief can look and say, hey, I feel so different, but the world is the same. It's like all we can really control, if I can't control my mom getting sick, if I can't control her passing, but I can control where I work, if I can control how I show up, then my real responsibility is living in integrity. It's living in joy. It's living in grief. It's living in whatever I need to embody to be myself and doing what I need to do to remove the box from my life. So that in itself, I decided if I can't change certain things in my life, but I can have control over other things, where do I want to spend my time? How do I want to invest in developing as a person? And the only thing, and this took years, the only thing I remembered feeling okay doing was writing. That was the only thing. The only thing I couldn't overwhelm in my life, Sarah, the only thing was the page, because the page welcomes me. The page says, you got more? Because we're ready, you know, like pour, more. Or, you know, you're not feeling it. You want to do minimalism today. You want to have 3 words and that's it. Then good. I'm down for that too. You know, so it was I never had an expectation of who I needed to be when I showed up to that workspace. And that's really what I wanted. You know, that was the coming home part for me. And I, you know, at every stage kept thinking, okay, this is the lesson I've learned it. But to be honest with you, this is 6 years later and I'm still in that process. Every day I still learn what it means to come home to myself. I still learn what it means to have grief as an unwavering, you know, sense of like a river in my life, because it's still there every day. So I think that this being open to that catalyst moment of the phone call, of the choice to go back home, of the choice to come home to myself with writing, and then every day after that to still honor that choice, that's really been my process. So it's an unfolding process. It's something that brings me perspective every day, and it's something that requires that I drop my ego in order to know that I'm still learning.
Hmm. And first, I want to just say I'm sorry, and I can totally, sympathize for you and your loss for your mom. But everything that you said is just like, damn, like, just damn. It's so, so, so relatable, especially, you know, it's hard for, a reader of yours to hear, or, just a follower of yours on social media, for you to imagine you to even be small or camouflage or anything other than what we see you now as, like, this big, expansive, ever growing, like this, fountain of overflowing life, um, that you share and inspire in people. And so you mentioned that your level of integrity and just really trying to just discover more of yourself is really what helped you through, um, the phase of I can't go back to who I was, or not who I was, but how I was.
Mm-hmm.
But did you experience any sort of risk factors in making that decision of I'm not going to go back and I don't know what's ahead, but I'm just going to find out and not have these expectations?
Ooh, that is a good question. Um, you know what's interesting is that I think that when I tell people, and I don't talk about it too often just because a lot of people don't really know how to sit in spaces of grief and they don't know how to sit in spaces of supporting someone who's in it. So I don't talk too much about it. But the decision for me to move back and care for my mom was seen as this like very selfless thing, right? It's very celebrated when I talk to people about it. And I can tell very quickly that they have an idea of what that means, which is fine. I'm letting them deal with their narrative, and I know my truth about what that choice actually meant to me. And I don't see it as something that was selfless. I see it as something that was intuitively guided, right? But
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, when I made the choice to leave public health, and I want to be very clear, I was in very beautiful teams. I was doing work that felt very rooted in goodness. It just wasn't for me. I felt like I was living a lie. I felt like I was living an ironic truth, that I was supposed to be solving problems that like we as the collective human has created, like how do I show up every day to solve a problem that if as humans we just respected and cared for each other, we wouldn't have those issues. Like it just was really difficult for me to continue in that level of engagement with those problems. So but I want to be clear that like I had a beautiful job, and I had these teams that were really nurturing me and they really were showing up for me and they wanted to see me expand and see me grow. And that was really beautiful. I think my decision to leave that space was largely misunderstood by most of the people in my life. So whereas they said, hey, uproot your entire life in California and go and take care of your mom, that's great. But then when you listen to that same intuition and leave your job, we're going to think that you're crazy. Um, that I think was eye-opening, right? And a lot of people thought that it was because of the grief that I was making this huge transition and that almost I couldn't be trusted in this new way because of the grief that I was experiencing. And so I was doubted by a lot of people in my life. Thankfully, I have cheerleaders in my life who, even people that I met in public health that have been, kind of beside me and cheering me on from the beginning. But my family, for one, was extremely shocked. I mean, every time I talk to my dad, he still says, "Hey, you can come stay with me whenever you need." He's waiting, almost like the waiting of like, we'll buffer your fall if you do. So, or maybe when you do. So I think when you are living in a world where neither one of my parents went to college, so it was a really big deal for me to go. I'm their firstborn. It was a huge deal for me to have a quote career with a quote degree attached to it, and so I was programmed for a long time to understand that success meant a degree, a success meant a salary, a success meant consistent work. And I had to face that demon when I made a decision to leave. I honestly see it as like jumping off a cliff and not even knowing if I had a parachute. I didn't even check. I just was like, yo, if I don't, I guess I'm going to figure it out on the way down because I don't know what else to do. Like it's death to stay. That sounds so dramatic, but when you feel your soul decaying in a spot and you're already
Mhm.
grieving, it's like nothing can be worse. What am I going to do? Like, I'll just figure it out. I'd much rather be free. On the free fall, at least I'll feel joy. That's just what I was thinking. So I had to quiet and face all those demons. Thankfully, I was in therapy at the time. And I just I said no to a promotion, a very significant promotion. It was like the universe was like testing me, right? Like, hey, like I know you want to leave, but here's a pretty significantly sized promotion. Here's an increase in job title. Here's all the things that you have been, all the carrots you've wanted, all the carrots that have kept you. So it literally was totally unsettling. It was absolutely scary. But at the same time, as soon as I committed, I started calling myself a writer before I believed it. I honestly, when I moved back to LA, I said I was a writer. I didn't even have a job. I was just saying what it is that I wanted. And I didn't believe it for a long time. It's still hard for me to call myself an artist. And people say all the time, like, a poet is an artist. What are you talking about? And I'm like, it's hard for me to call myself a poet. So, it's like at this, like this, on this soul level, it's a homecoming, but on this cognitive level, I still fight myself. I still deal with imposter syndrome all the time. It still shocks me when someone tells me they've read The Story of Us. I'm like, wait, what? Oh yeah, it's published, like it's crazy to me. But at the same time, like really trying to tune into that integrity, really trying to tune into that intuition has been something that's like an unwavering calm in my life. So now I just make decisions like, oh, it feels chaotic to believe that I'm a fake, but it feels much more peaceful to believe I'm doing my best. So let's just do that. Let's just believe I'm doing my best and keep showing up. And it surprises me where I am now. I'm just like, wow, 6 years ago, if I would have known this, I guess I would have known I had a parachute,
Oh yeah, wouldn't it be great if our future self could actually just like come and pat ourselves on the back and be like, no, you're gonna be fine. Just wait, like you got this.
Totally. Yes. Just trust the process. Everything's fine. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Can you dive a little deeper on the imposter syndrome thing? Because it's like, what popped in my mind was like, yeah, all the gurus even say that they don't know anything. Like,
Oh yeah.
and it almost seems like the people who actually suffer with imposter syndrome are the ones that, I don't believe in shoulds, coulds, woulds, or whatever, but like should be in that role. Like they
Mm-hmm.
are the people who can really illuminate so much of that role to really just really amplify it for the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, oh man, imposter syndrome, it's like the dark cloud, right? I mean, I think so. This is sometimes what I think I see it as is I do a lot of thinking about the soul and the ego. A lot of my writing is around that too. And a lot of exploration around expectations of self and others. And I think the ego is very, very, very good at telling us what we should do, how we should do it, and judging us if we don't do that. Right. So, this expectation on if you're putting work out into the world, you really need to feel super secure in yourself. You really need to feel like the expert. You really need to feel XYZ, right? So it's like artistry feels so deeply personal because it is, right? Because we're putting out a portion of ourselves that is, I try to say, distilled down to truth, right? I don't let a piece go outside of my realm unless I feel like it's closed with honesty. Right. That doesn't mean it's perfect. That's a whole other thing. It doesn't mean that it's going to affect someone else in a certain way. It doesn't mean anything except that it feels closed emotionally to me, right? In my own truth, in that moment, it feels like it needs to be outside of my world. So that's the standard that I hold for myself, right? But then and that's a soul-based place for myself, is like, okay, so I feel a stirring in my soul. Oh, it feels satiated when I have these words specifically on this page at this time. It's ready to be released. Then the ego says, yo, girl, you think anybody gonna want to read that? Like, oh, wait, hold on. You think anybody's going to care? Like, why are people going to listen to you? Why are they going to read you? Like, what is the point of you speaking? What is the point of you having work out in the world, right? So the ego wants to come in to keep us small. The ego likes to tell us stories about how we're not worthy, about how we're not the ones that should be speaking, about how other people know more, right? Because it's all about comparison. It's comparison about our past self, who we want our future self to be, who we should be right now. The coulds, the shoulds, the woulds, exactly like you just said. That's all ego-based thinking. Imposter syndrome lives in the idea that we are not enough in order to keep us small. That to me is a battle daily, is to say, stop boxing me in. Stop telling me I'm not good enough. Stop telling me I'm not worthy. I have a voice. I can share it. It is what it is. You know, however many likes I get on Instagram, whatever, it doesn't even matter. The fact is, if you're staying true to your word, if you're staying true to your truth, to your honest attempt to close emotionally what you've put out, right? To let it feel protected, to let it feel secure in itself. That's the best thing that you can ask for. Whether it affects someone else, whether it impacts their soul, whether it lands at the right place or the right time, that has nothing to do with your work. Your work is just asking you to show up authentically. And imposter syndrome is only trying to take you away from your core self. It's only trying to take you away from the soul, to put you in a mind space that's going to keep you small, that's going to keep you distracted, so you're not putting out the work that you know you need to put out. You know, and I think from that point forward, once I started seeing it as a part of myself that needed nurturing, you know, that ego is not something that we need to hate. It's just something we need to befriend. When I understand, oh, 3/4 of the way through a project, I'm going to hear your voice. Okay, now I know. The next time, 3/4 of the way through the project, I'm going to do a lot more self-love. I'm going to really address it head on instead of letting that lingering voice stay in my head.
Oh, wow. You can feel the love that you really pour into your work. And now hearing that, it's going like I realize that that is a source of that love. It's that love for yourself and everything. So, being in Los Angeles, where I'm sure imposter syndrome thrives,
Mm.
how do you go about it? And what are you witnessing in Los Angeles in terms of that and in terms of people overcoming that to just stay true to themselves and to their work and everything?
I love that you bring up LA because it has LA is just such a special part of, I think, who I am. You know, I came to undergrad in LA. I was at Loyola Marymount, which is on the west side, right? It like is on this little bubble, right? It almost feels removed from the city. But it was really the first place I feel like I could be myself. And I was still obviously operating under the idea of like what I should be socially. But coming home to myself, really that physical move to LA signified that for me. It was the choice that I was making to nurture a part of myself. I had it nurtured. I was raised in North Carolina, so I needed to bust out of the closet and be in Los Angeles, and that's like really where I landed, and I was able to actually nurture a part of myself for the first time. And the thing that I love about LA has stayed the same. So many people that I know have found themselves here. And I don't mean that LA has changed who they are. I mean that it for them is a homecoming as well. I'm surrounded by artists. It's beautiful to be with people that are on a hustle, to be with people that have a creative vision, to be with people that struggle with some of the same things that we struggle with when we're putting out a part of ourselves and it's gaining public exposure, right? So I think that I don't know if there's a more powerful force than a creative individual in flow, right? Because something magical happens when we get rid of societal expectations, when we get rid of the constraints of our own mind, when we're actually just in a very creative state, anything becomes possible. And if you have a group of people doing that together, that's where I always say it when I step onto a project, that's where the real magic happens. When you're in synergy with other people who are actually tuned in with their souls and they're doing the work that they don't have to do, but they want to do, there's something so beautiful about that, right? And then in a space where you're actually creative and you're vulnerably engaging, what happens is we hear the imposter voice, right, of someone else come out. And there's something so beautiful about nurturing your friends and nurturing yourself on this path to saying, I know the voice is telling you that you're not doing the right thing, but you are. Keep going, keep going, keep going. You know, it's like the whole city cheers for each other. And I think that that's something that people don't think about when they think about LA because of what they've seen in Hollywood and what they, you know, all those things. Like whatever ego-based thing they've seen about the city, it is what it is, right? But my internal experience, something that has always welcomed me home, is the opportunity to be myself and to see other people who were really just trying to do the same damn thing. You know, they were really just showing up. And there's something so gorgeous about that. Like human nature is so beautiful when we live without limits, right? And this city asks you, what do you love and how do you want to do it? Because it'll give you everything. You just have to go. You just have to move. You have to find the flow.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. That's amazing. I mean, I could keep talking and talking about supporting each other, and I even have a post in my Instagram, like in my drafts ready to go, that talks about, you know, if we can just be like, people think that it's courageous or brave to just be our naked, authentic selves, like the parts of us that we don't put a mask on or hide or
Mm.
try to perfect or anything like that. Like, what when we say that it's brave, we're just forgetting that that's the natural way to be. And it's really
Yes.
just like this coming back to ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Oh man. So I know that you are totally fascinated by, you know, spirit and soul and mind exploration on your path. But how have you, I don't know if cope is the right way, but how have you lived through, I guess, the changes, that the transformation process of, you know, letting yourself be big and expansive after, you know, people haven't been ready for that, I guess,
Mm.
that have been around you, you know, growing up. Um, yeah, how have you actually lived through those changes and settled into who you are now?
You ask good questions, lady. I like you. I mean, I like you for just who you are, but also very thoughtful. No, I think that I know that, and I read your work obviously, and I know that you've been on a journey as well, and that it's warming and it feels like a homecoming to have conversations like this where you can feel deeply held and deeply seen, right? And I think that when we don't have relationships like that growing up, and that's okay. It's like we've all had circumstances that have kept us from ourselves, right? But I think that once I started to awaken to this idea that I wasn't fully expressed, it made me really curious. I was like, oh wow, well if I've been living under this kind of rock, or you know, with these like layers and layers of masks on, as you say, if I've been living in this way, like I wonder who I really am. I was kind of curious. I wanted to actually know. I wanted to know, what is it like to actually see myself for who I am? If I put myself in circumstances where I can feel like I'm expanding, who the hell am I? Like, what I wonder what I'm like, you know? So I wonder if I'm not just playing this role where I have to be funny, or I have to be quiet, or I have to be let's be real, I've never been quiet. That was part of the problem. But like if I have to, like if I drop the roles and I just get to show up, what's that like? So okay, let's add thing. If I This is the thing. When I was in the middle of grieving, when I was in the middle of mourning and loss, nothing felt good, right? Let's be very honest. Dark Night of the Soul is some scary shit. It honestly turned my world upside down. I used to say that it felt like grief had torn a side of my heart completely open. Like I just felt exposed to the world, right? So nothing felt good. But I knew that something was happening. I knew that there was an unraveling. I knew that there was something else, right? There was something else underneath all of that pain. So instead of trying to solve the grief, instead of trying to solve the mourning and the loss, which newsflash, I couldn't fucking do. Can I say fucking?
No, you can say whatever you want.
Woo! I couldn't fucking solve the grief, right? So I just started to add joy in. I started to add in things. And the way that I cope is by adding in things that help me feel like myself. And I know that they help me feel like myself because they either give me a sense of peace or they give me a sense of joy. And so a lot of that came through therapy. I will be really honest. I love therapy. I'm a huge fan. And I think everybody at the highest and the lowest points of their life will benefit. So that's just where, and I think everybody should have access to it, and it should be obviously affordable. So that's my PSA on that. But being in therapy really asked me to, for the first time in my life, focus on myself. You focus on, if I couldn't solve this grief, what could I do? Right. So that's where I decided to fully commit to being sober. That's where I decided to start meditation. That's where I decided to start yoga. That's where I decided to start running. That's where I decided to start looking at boundaries. That's where I started looking at things like positive and constructive self-realization, right? So holding myself to a standard while actually allowing for grace. So the way that I cope is by realizing that it's not about fixing, it's about allowing. And every day I ask myself, can you try less hard? Can you actually stop trying to fix yourself and let yourself be? Right? Because I think that the real aspect of homecoming is the full acceptance of wherever we are at every moment. Yeah, there are parts of myself that I don't like sometimes. Sometimes I'm really impatient. Sometimes I really just don't want to deal with people. Like that, those things happen, right? When we're feeling maxed, like those are things that I sometimes don't like about myself. But at the same time, instead of pushing those parts away, which is what everybody else wants you to do, instead of denying it or avoiding it, I actually just welcome it now. You know, I just say, what is it that you need? Okay, so you don't want to talk to people? You don't have to talk to people. That's okay. You want to take a break? Go for a walk. You know, you want to take a nap? Get some tacos. Like, do what you need to do to allow yourself to simply be. And by letting myself be, that's how I cope. I cope by just universally accepting myself and challenging myself to love even the parts of myself that I don't really like. And it's a process. I do it every day. I journal every morning to accept myself as I rise, you know, and that's something that in meditation, I shed the expectation of who I want myself to be, because the social expectation becomes a part of our inner narrative. And it wasn't until I realized that I was operating under a social narrative that I realized, oh shit, it permeated into my psyche. I was asking myself to be small. So I have to, in order to shed that voice, acknowledge that it's there so that I can lessen my defense and allow myself to move through it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. There are so many good points in there. Like, so many good points that we could all really take away and try to actually integrate, whether it's, yeah, Dark Nights of the Soul, like they fucking suck, but they hurt so good at the same time.
Yeah, for sure.
And, you know, like doing less and trying less and working, like removing the hard part of working on ourselves. It doesn't have to be hard. It can just be this acceptance and figuring it out from there. And oh, there's just so much gold in there. So what's been the biggest or most helpful advice or activity that you've actually learned that has helped you on your path and through your process?
Let's see. I feel like there are different things that help me at different times. But I really think that this idea of trying less hard has been, it's really been a stronghold, I think, in my, if I were to have like a list of mantras in my life, that's one that I go back to a lot. You know, because I think, you know, the Capricorn in me, which Cap Sun, hey, like I feel like pushing a lot, you know, and I have goals that are very significant, and that's goals in personal development as well as career. That's, you know, relationships, it's all those things, right? I have a spreadsheet of goals, but at the same time, really having to acknowledge my tendency to fill my spreadsheet with goals, but not with celebrations, has been something that really required me to think about my life, right? So if I am always setting a barometer of change, always trying to check a box, always trying to move forward, where is my life? I'm always thinking about what I need to achieve in order to be loved by myself. And then that to me is unacceptable. That cannot happen. My life happens right now. It is here in the now, right? We are experiencing this conversation. We are both present, thankfully. We are both in it. And this is the beautiful exchange of life. So I miss out if I have, you know, goals out the wazoo and check marks and trying to, pace and try, like that is just way too future oriented. So I think trying less hard reminds me of celebrating the micro things along the way, because really joy, I didn't have a relationship with joy until my late 20s. I just didn't know what it was. I operated from a happy or an angry place in my household. That was it. And joy, that unwavering sense of elation that is just not even rooted in a specific thing or person, it's just what it is. It just feels like lightness in your body. That is what I access when I try less hard. So I think that I come back to that when I feel overwhelmed. I come back to that when I feel like, that voice that says, you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not doing enough, you're not trying so hard, you're still mourning, you're still grieving. What is this? What is this? It's like, this is life, and I'm trying to not try. I'm trying to show up and just let it be. And the waves that come over me are the waves that come over me. And it is like being open to the experience of life, is not trying to control it so that I can manage it enough to fit it in a box. I manage it enough to, to check it off and say that I've dealt with that. So I think that that's probably, that's the thing that roots me back in myself, is to say that I'm actually fine exactly as I am. This story is what it is. And I am showing up every day. And there's something really, really beautiful just in that.
That is so powerful. And so you mentioned that you didn't really find joy until your late 20s. When did you actually realize that things were taking that positive turn?
Ooh, let me see here. Very good question. I really felt a momentum shift in my grief. I was on a hike with my best friend, and it was 6 months into my grieving, right? So I was operating from this place of extreme shock. The thing about grief shock is that you don't even know you're in it. I didn't know I was in this like blanket of lacking awareness for years. I was really just trying to cope and trying to go through it. And at the same time, the only thing that was guiding me was my intuition, which is actually really beautiful when I think about it, because I couldn't conceptualize the loss on a cognitive level. So intuitively, I was doing what I needed to do. And being back in this space and being on this hike with one of my favorite people in life, I remember sitting on top of this like picnic table area, and we were overlooking Los Angeles. And I felt for the first time like this lightness in my body, right? And it felt so, for lack of a better word, it felt expansive, right? And it was in stark contrast to everything that I had felt before that. It was this feeling that was not covering or replacing the grief that I felt, because the thing about grief is that it stays with you and it's always with you. And sometimes it comes to the surface and sometimes it doesn't. But I was feeling joy in addition to this really deep sorrow. And that feeling of lightness in my body, the feeling of being in in the right space at the right time. I think that was really one of the biggest points in my healing journey that made me realize it doesn't have to be all dark, because so many times when we're in the midst of healing, it feels like, shit, this is a never ending pit. Like, am I ever going to get out of this? It feels so overwhelming to be. I wrote a poem once about being on the floor of this grounded pit, and you can't get any deeper and you don't know where else to go. So you just write your initials in the floor because someone else is going to be there too. And they come in and they feel your initials and they know that, you're going to survive this because I just did too. So it's like that feeling sometimes of just being in this space is so overwhelming. And it doesn't always feel like we have multiple levels to us, but there are times and there are spaces and there are people that remind us that we have so many levels of emotion. We have so many levels to us as people, right? So I was able to have this like extremely deep grief within me, but sitting on this mountain overlooking Los Angeles with one of my favorite people, the sun was shining. I just remember it so much in my body. Like, it was the introduction of light into a place that had only been dark for so long. And I think that the thing about joy that I love is that it doesn't have to be something that's contained, because it can't be contained. It just is. It's just an essence. It's just a flow, right? It's an acknowledgement of the lightness in my body. So, and it feels very much like a place of home for me. So when I feel peace, when I feel joy, I feel like myself. So I knew that I wasn't the darkness that was in me, because something else felt more familiar than the pain. And that was the joy that I was feeling. So I think that at that point, I started to open my eyes and open my heart and trust that it was okay to acknowledge that I could have multiple levels to me. I could have experiences that allowed me to feel joy as well as to manage that pain, right? I didn't have to choose one or the other. And the fact that we feel like sometimes we have to, I think it really just limits us in our growth, and it limits us in our healing, because we can still validate our pain while opening ourselves up to something lighter.
Yeah,
It,
it's
it
such a
really, it's a
beautiful
welcome
space to be in
space,
as
because
well.
after, sometimes you forget what it feels like to feel good. You forget what it feels like to not be in that pain. And um, the micro celebrations of joy along the way have really kind of helped root me in a feeling and in the space of the now, which is something that pain sometimes can overwhelm and take you out of.
Yeah, absolutely. And so
Of
you
course.
mentioned, if I can backtrack a little, you mentioned that you have a spreadsheet of goals, but not the celebrations. And so, what kind of goals and dreams have already come to fruition because of your transformation process and because of your rising? I mean,
Thank
obviously,
you.
your books are just incredible,
I
but
think
is
that
there anything else?
jumping full, I mean, I guess the structure of my goals has really changed, right? Because a lot of what I try to do now is my goal is to show up authentically in whatever space I'm in. So when I first got into writing, even before I had a job, I made a promise to myself. I said, and this is kind of how my goals shifted, right? It shifted from like a job that makes me XYZ a year and I get XYZ from it to, you know, jump into a job, accept a job that ignites your soul, accept a job that feels deeply personal. And when you are about to accept a job, ask yourself if you're going to be allowed to expand into yourself as you accept it, right? So I think that what this was doing for me, that spreadsheet, the content on that spreadsheet shifted. The focus of it shifted, and that in itself is a success. It was shifting from an externally motivated, socially pressured list of standards or expectations, and it was much more intuitively guided. It asked me to drop the barrier between my work life and my personal life, which can feel very dangerous sometimes, uh, because it requires a lot of boundary setting. But at the same time, I wanted work that ignited my soul. I wanted things to make me feel alive. If I have to spend hours and hours and hours a week doing something, I want it to feel like I am invested. I want it to feel like it matters, right? To me personally. So in a way that like ignites who I am. Greater alignment with my purpose, greater alignment with my journey here. So that I think has been, I don't know if showcased is the right word, but I would say that has been supported through the work that I've been invited to join. Natasha's Not My Name is a memoir that I co-wrote with a beautiful person named Isabella Grasso. She has an incredible story. And that process of being trusted to write some of the darkest and deepest parts of her life and her healing alongside her has been absolutely beautiful. It's something that I never take for granted. It's a level of trust that I think has reminded me time and time again that this is a privilege to do this work. It's a privilege to be able to show up beside people and to hold their hearts in safe space and to explore with them the meaning of their own lives. And that's something, a memoir that's so deeply personal to her, and something that was just a pure opportunity of joy for me to be involved with. Obviously, The Story of Us was something that was a personal project that I kind of, was intimidated to to do it first, but something that like pushed me beyond myself to tell this like hopefully, more collective story of love and what it means to actually like be invested at each stage of love. And then I actually I call myself a filmmaker during the day and a poet at night. So I'm doing documentary work right now, and I'm developing scripts that really try to hold and conceptualize the complexity of women's stories in a way that feels like it actually honors those voices versus overshadows or disempowers. And so I think that at this opportunity in time, my focus has really been, how can I stay true to my voice, stay true to the opportunities in front of me, and bring forth a lens that maybe hasn't been seen or has been overshadowed. And those are my goals now. Those are the things on my spreadsheet. Those are the things that really orient me towards like my North Star, if I, were to use the sky, which obviously I love the sky. So I think that it's been beautiful to watch myself, and I've been surprised by myself to say, it's not the bank account, it's not the promotion, it's not, this socially desirable box check of success that really gives me ultimate satisfaction. It's really, did I show up with my authentic self? Did I honor the voices of the people that I've had the privilege to hear from? And did I move a conversation forward? And that's really what I aim to do in every aspect of my work now.
That's definitely what you do. You mentioned North Star, and the whole time you're talking, I'm like, yeah, she's a way shower. She's a guiding light for people. Like, it's the epitome of people that we want in the world. Of, you blaze your trail and then you turn back and you lend a helping hand, or you give some tips or some pointers or something like that for the people that are coming behind you. Like, I actually even got teary-eyed when you mentioned being at the bottom of the pit and writing your initials so that when somebody else is there, you know that it's survivable. And it's just so, so beautiful. So how do you personally see your work
You're such a
impacting
beautiful
others?
person. Can I just say that? You're just, oh, my heart just is just like, oh,
Thank you.
Sarah, you're so sweet. You're honestly so kind, and like the way that you show up with so much just joy and honesty and space is just so beautiful. So anyway, I just needed to say that. But I think that
I
if I'm
appreciate it.
completely honest with you, when I first started my Instagram, I did not think anyone would read my work. I had zero idea. Like, I started my Instagram as as a personal challenge. I told myself, Megan, you're going to write every single day, and you are going to post every single day, and no excuses. You're going to do it. And I kind of just did it. I had to hear that imposter syndrome voice come in a lot. And that wanted my focus to be on other people, that wanted my focus to be on if it would have an impact, that wanted my focus to be outward. And I had to really ask myself, what is the point? The point of my work is not to enact or to, I guess I want to say, it's not to spark a particular response, right? So many people say like, oh, I really love it when my work sparks change, or I really they engage in work because they want to elicit a certain response. And I respect that. That's totally, what every artist does their thing. I find it highly distracting if I am trying to do something for others. If I'm trying to have a particular emotional response be elicited, if I am trying to make it relevant, or if I'm trying to make it enough, I guess is the right word. If I'm trying to make it be what someone else needs it to be, it feels deeply distracting. So what my process has always been, and I think I see this most clearly with The Story of Us, right? The Story of Us is a deeply, deeply personal story, and in being invested at each stage of love, right? And it asked me, whoop, you want to uncover some ugly stuff about you, girl? Like, let's go in, dive into love, see yourself in it, see your limitations. Ooh, those are some emotions. If you want to grief and love, those are the two things that are going to spark some stuff within you. So if you want to dive deep, right? So I asked myself, like, can you be honest in this work? Show up in this work and be honest. Show up in this work and be honest. And for the basic, like the basics of that huge project, let me slow my words, my mind is moving so fast. The basics of that project were always rooted in my own personal truth. But I will tell you that as soon as I decided to publish, I did it from a space of, if this could help someone else think about things differently, see something different, feel comfort, right? If this could do something like that, I want to give it the opportunity to do that, right? So it's always starts with me first. And then it feels like, if I feel like it has that emotional containment, and protection around it, like I felt like it was final, then I invite others to see it. And I will tell you that it is so humbling when I hear people say, my partner and I read the story of us together last night, or, I'm going through a breakup right now. I finally feel seen and heard, or this has helped me heal years of relationship trauma. Like things like that I hear from people. I'm telling you, like, I am shocked. Because I never thought that would be the response it would get. I just kind of did it and was like, it'll land where it lands. If people read it, they read it. If they don't, it's okay. My journey is complete with it. But I do realize that once something leaves your hands, it's a shared journey. And there's something really, really beautiful about walking that journey together and acknowledging that the pieces of us that we share can really bring a lot of comfort to others. So the story of us has kind of allowed me to see that the power of sharing and the power of vulnerability is so uniting. And it's something that people, that I myself and other people have told me that they really do need, is to know, you're not alone. This is like one of the most communal experiences in our lives, is to be in love, to feel in loss. So it's like, if you are in those two places, you've got others there with you. So it's just something that it humbles me all the time to think that my work is something that could impact someone else. And even though it wasn't the original intention, like, I'm grateful that it's doing that.
It absolutely is. That's the whole reason why I even started following you on Instagram, because I was going through a phase in my life and I was like, oh my God, this is exactly how I'm feeling. It's so nice to hear that reflected in a physical form from somebody else. And, whether it was something sad or something like elating, I was just, every single thing that you posted, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I need right now. This is so healing. Thank you, universe, for like attracting this,
Right.
Instagram account, because that's how
Totally.
I saw you at first, just an Instagram account. And and I think that that's something too that we forget, especially on social media, that we are people. Like every single person behind the account has this story. And I mean, we all love when people can open up and share more about their stories on there. So just thank you so so much for sharing yours, and
You're so
you've
kind. And
definitely
I feel the
impacted
exact
my
same way about
life.
you. I think that um, souls on a journey kind of just like gravitate towards each other in like really beautiful ways sometimes. And I think that's really, part of the journey. And you create ripples. I don't know if you know this, but you are wow, just in essence onto yourself. It just, I mean, I wish I had the words. My poet brain is like not operating at the present moment, but I hope you know the light that you carry, and even you don't have to do anything to manage it. It just is what it is. And you're beautiful in the way that you show up, and the vulnerability that you have and the expansion that I've seen since we've been following each other is just, it's so inspiring, jaw dropping. I mean, your ripples are huge. And we're all lucky because you show up.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
of
That is
course.
wholeheartedly
Yeah.
appreciated. Thank you for seeing that in me. So I'm sorry, what do you love most about where you are right now in your life?
Ooh, what do I love most? I think I'm having a lot more fun. I think that after when I was first in the middle of grieving, I was really pissed off. I'm going to be honest. I was very, very angry. I was angry at the universe. I did not want to learn the lesson that way. I didn't know what the lesson was. Hell, sometimes I still don't know if I know, and I was very, very upset. And it took a while, and it took instances of joy coming in, and like that hike that I talked about. It took new relationships, old relationships being repaired. It took me expanding and relaxing into myself. It took a lot for me to allow myself to have fun, allow myself to try less hard, allow myself to actually enjoy the journey. So I think right now, not everything is perfect. Let's be real, hashtag humans. Like there's a lot going on all the time and a constant opportunity for growth. But I will tell you, I'm taking it a lot less seriously now. I'm just trying to show up and be the best person that I can be. And I make mistakes a lot and I try a lot and then I don't try because I'm trying not to try. And then I, like I'm really just trying to make room for joy though, because the thing is at the end of the day, I can't continue pushing and pushing and pushing for healing. Healing happens regardless of what we do sometimes. There's so much healing that happens in joyful spaces. There's so much healing that happens in love spaces. There's so much, opportunity for growth beyond just pain. And I think at this point in where I am, I'm really seeing what it means to feel free and what it means to be unbound by my own expectations of growth. And that to me feels liberating. It feels so empowering to say, I don't have to just grow through pain. I can grow through joy. I can grow through peace. I can grow through love. And that is the most rewarding part of my life right now, by far.
I
Thank
love
you.
hearing
Thank
that. I'm
you.
so happy
It's
for
been a
you.
journey. It's been a journey.
So where can, oh yeah, it definitely sounds like it. And it's truly been an honor to be able to, offer a platform for you to share some of that journey, just a little glimpse into it. And hopefully, I hope one day there's a
I
documentary about
appreciate
you
you.
and
That's
your
so
voice and
kind.
your
And thank
story.
you. I mean, your episodes are amazing. I learn something every time. I always take something away from them. So the fact that, you're showing up to showcase other people and the journeys that really unite us all, it really does matter. So thank you for that.
Oh my gosh, you are so sweet. Thank you. So, where can people find you and your work if they want to check out the book, check out, just you and all of
Let's see
your
here. So I
writing
should be launching a
glory?
website at some point, but that's not exactly happening at this point. So hopefully that will be up. But the place that I frequent most often is definitely on Instagram. So I have links to Natasha's Not My Name, as well as The Story of Us and other projects that I'm involved in. So you can definitely check me out there.
Awesome. And your
Yes, it
handle is
is ML
ML Bordner,
Bordner.
right?
Let's
Awesome.
hear it.
Okay, so I just have one last question. It is my favorite. Okay, it's my favorite question to ask people, but also for everybody to ask themselves that's listening. So the question is, who is the superhero inside of you that has all the
Who
power
is
you
the
could ever need?
superhero inside of me that has all the power I could ever need? Oh, I don't even know what this question means, but I
Yeah.
like it. Um, wait, what do you actually mean? Like if I had to name it?
uh,
Okay.
Anything. This has been interpreted in so
The
many different ways. People,
you like the Capricorn
yeah,
in me
yeah,
that's like, wait,
totally
hold on,
open to
what's the
you.
expectation here? Hold on, what does this actually mean? Um, the superhero inside of me that has all the answers I need. Hmm.
Answers, power, everything that you need.
Oh, I like this. The superhero inside of me is um my soul. It is the guiding light for everything in my life. It's my inner wisdom. It's my North Star. It is my purpose. It is my freedom, my peace. It is the joy within me. If I can tune into that at any point of the day, I have every answer that I need. So I would definitely say that it's the soul.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I have so much
I
gratitude, and
appreciate you so
it's
much,
truly
Sarah.
been
Thank you
such an
so
honor.
much.
I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope that this episode has some way inspired you to take control, given you the tools to feel secure and on fire in your own independence, and help to unlock within you the impact that you're here to make. You're not born with a purpose. You're born as your purpose. It's already inside of you, and it's your responsibility in this life to live that in the truest way possible. If you've gotten any sort of value out of this episode, please share it so that we can together expand our inspiration and our impact in this world.